Welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. And today is Friday, October 27th, 2023. And their call-in number is 563-999-3581 and press 1. And that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we would love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And yesterday we had Michael started reading from the new article that he wrote, or is writing. He's been writing it for a while. And I'm not sure if it's at a completion point enough where he can continue reading it today or not. We'll find out when he gets on the show. And like we had announced yesterday, if there is any article or subject that, we just finished the article on the gentleman who said that we did not have free will. And we read that. We commented on it. We gave our commentary based on this work. And so if you have an article or a conversation going on and you would like to hear our point of view or our guidance or explanation, then please let us know. We would love to take it in that direction because it has definitely brought on more conversation from the audience than when we just do a monologue or pick our own topics. It seems to go very well. So we'd love to hear from you. If you've got something, please send it to me at Jeanie, Jeanie, at whyagain.org, and we will put it into the hopper. I'm going to say welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here. And a shout-out to the gentleman who suggested that article to us and opened space for us to do the last 4 sessions around the idea of free will. And if there's something in particular, that you've come across regarding this work that you'd like to hear us expound on in terms of how does this idea or that idea from whatever source you got fit into this work, we'd love to hear it. It would, I think, the last couple of days really expanded the conversation in important directions that otherwise we'd probably never hear and never have the brain cells for. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they were talking about how they were offering some of the Aramaic ideas, someone who was in a fairly fundamentalist place, and they were offering some of the Aramaic ideas, and it was just like there was just no... People just had a blank stare, no response. And it's like, well, yeah, if the mind doesn't have the requisite content energetically to produce a particular reality, then the mind can't produce that reality. Yeshua said it 2,000 years ago. He said you've got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. I think we can safely assume that most everybody in his audience had what we call eyes and ears. So he wasn't talking about that. He was saying you could have the brain cells. And our listening always comes from the brain cells that fire in us. I use the example oftentimes. You've heard me use it before, but it fits here again. Let's imagine that we're doing a series of workshops in your hometown, and you are the best translator of Russian into English and English into Russian in the world, and we hear from somebody from Russia who wants to come and do the workshop. And so I contact you and say, hey, I know you've got an extra room in your house and that you have this Russian skill of speaking Russian. Would you be willing to pick this person up at the airport, host them for the week, translate for them, and take them back to the airport? And you're like, yeah, I'd love to do it. That'd be great. And so we have a week of workshops. We go out for dinner a couple times with this fellow, and we just really have a good time. And at the end of the week, as you're getting ready to take him back to the airport, I say, would you please let him know that I think he's really cool? And you turn to him in your best Russian and tell him that Michael thinks he's got a low body temperature. Now, you said exactly what I said, but what you said had nothing to do with the meaning that I held in my brain cells. So in my brain cells, I'm, Western civilization cool means, hey, you're good, you're awesome, we like you. But, and this is where the responsibility for listening comes in. If the brain cells that fired in this gentleman who was the translator were cool means low body temperature. You know, he speaks Russian. He's not maybe that acclimatized in the West. And so the word cool has there are no brain cells in him to hear the word cool as a descriptor for somebody that we really like. And so his listening provides him a translation. And that translation is something to do with body temperature. And of course, saying that someone is really cool has absolutely nothing to do with temperature. English idiom. And so the Aramaic language, so that's an example of an idiom, and the Aramaic language is just absolutely, totally, and completely rife with idioms. It's filled with idioms. And the thing about an idiom is you can't translate an idiom. You've got to know the meaning behind it. You can't translate words, the word cool, and come up with an accurate meaning for what I had said about this gentleman from Russia. And so if one is speaking about Greek ideas, like for instance, if in Aramaic I say to you, you must forgive as to that pain and what Charlie did, then your brain might translate that because of the brain cells that would fire in you as, I have to forgive Charlie. And I would say, no, 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 not at all. Charlie's part of the conversation because Charlie was the trigger for the pain that came up in you. But what I want you to hear is I'm inviting you to forgive, to remove the pain that's moving in you, not to let Charlie off the hook because that pain is moving in you. Now we've got a whole different game going on. And around virtually every key idea from the Aramaic, as we talked about the other day, we talked about how there are these 5 spiritual faculties and that the non-being mind or the ego mind has a cheap copy of each of the spiritual faculties. Well, so it is in the Greek language. There is a cheap copy for everything that's real in the spiritual dimension. You know, in the spiritual dimension, love describes the fact of human life. In the Greeks, it's got something to do with sexual athletics or letting somebody else off the hook or you know, putting your head on the chopping block after you've forgiven them and letting them abuse you, or self-sacrifice. It's got all kinds of meanings that are not relative to the Aramaic. So when we're speaking about the word love here, we're using a word that's describing you as your human essence, not something you're going to do to somebody else or something you're going to give to somebody else or something you're going to get from somebody else. So you could go through a litany of all of the key ideas from the Aramaic and find the world rife, the Greek world rife with cheap copies, but you won't find the very thing itself. And once you realize that, then you start checking out, well, which world are we talking about? In the ancient scriptures, they talked about the world of the mind of man. And then they talked about the world of the plan of God. Now, that's not a religious idea. It's just the difference between, you know, the language of the Aramaic would be about what there is in the plan of the Creator, what exists in the actuality, where the mind of man, which is spoken about, is simply what perceptual constructs does the human mind generate in regard to any given idea. And so if we're stuck in the limited perception of the human mind, chances are we're not going to be able to reach very far into the dimension of our true being, our true actuality. So I hope that helps to clarify at least a little bit where we're going with this and why we're carrying on this ongoing long-term conversation. You know, it's been going on for 12 years, and why would we want to carry it on 5 days a week, an hour to 2 hours a day for 12 years and continue? Because we're looking to provide a space for people who speak one language the language of our Western culture to understand and be able to have their minds generate realities based in the culture in which Yeshua originally taught his teaching, the only culture in which it has real meaning. So he says you've got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, and that's what we're talking about. We're building brain cells. We're not talking about building new physical structure. When I talk about building brain cells, I'm talking about the fact that every cell in our structure is, in this language we're speaking, a brain cell. That is, every cell stores information. And that information, when it fires in the future, will reflect the content that's been built into brain cells through the process of information taken in by the senses. And one of the key concepts here is that everything that has to do with the truth is going to energetically be connected to active present love. Even if some of the most despicable things are happening in the world, the mind that has brain cells that are keyed to love is going to go to constructs based in love. And everything based in hostility and fear in any of its forms, sadness, grief, rage, condemnation, gossip, slander, vengeance, anything based in that is based in the false world, and by definition means we're stuck in, quote unquote, the mind of man. The mind of man has generation upon generation upon generation of suffering, of pain, of trauma, of turmoil, of rage, of sadness, of grief. I just watched a video this morning, and I'm looking for the name of it here. Just give me 1 second. Shattered Dreams of Peace. Israeli-Palestinian Relations After Oslo. So Shattered Dreams on YouTube if you want to take a look at it. It's a 2-hour PBS special. Shattered Dreams of Peace. Israeli-Palestinian Relations After Oslo. And I'm about, it's an hour and 54 minutes, and I'm an hour and 43 minutes into it. And the tragedy of how close the different accords came to creating peace, something I didn't know. I was aware of, there were Camp David Accords, and there were Camp David meetings, and there were there were several different peace efforts. I didn't really understand the intricate role, and it actually elevated my view of Bill Clinton significantly when I saw the role that he played in consistently and persistently working toward bringing these parties together. And as you watch it, it's just so tragic how close they came. And sometimes over the actions of just one person who lived in hostility or fear, a whole delicate structure that would have led to serenity in the region just collapsed. It's like, oh my gosh, how crazy is this? And it, for me, reinforced the need for the ability of people to remove from their minds those things based in hostility or fear. Because when the stress is up and the chips are down, everybody who hasn't done that work is going to go back to the dynamics of their power person. And when you look at the kind of violence that historically has taken place, the power person dynamics are a travesty. They are a tragedy inside of the family system. And then, once expressed in the family system, if someone doesn't have the tools of forgiveness to free oneself of those power person dynamics, which have usually been going on for many, many, many generations, how, when there are millions of people who are raised in those kind of power person dynamics, how is it going to happen that everybody's going to come to one mind and one accord and actually save their children from this blistering hatred and vengeance and murder. They're just a wholesale slaughter that's taken place. You know, one of the phrases in the Beatitudes, if you remember the session we did on the Beatitudes back, probably a year ago now, one of the key ones there that always comes to mind when I watch something like this is the phrase that says that this neural structure inside of us that was designed to guide us to happiness and well-being only becomes our conscious possession, only becomes active, and the whole of the Beatitude shows you what the how to achieve that, but one of them is just and fair behavior between people. Do you effort for just and fair behavior, or do you just effort to win? And just and fair behavior is one of the keys to being granted access to the deepest guidance in you toward true happiness and well-being. And yet the world so often is looking for advantage. And when I say the world, I talk about myself as well. It's work that layer by layer, level by level, I realize I have to do, and we all have to do, if we're ever going to have access to that deepest place within ourselves. So moving forward, well, actually, before we move forward, I was just about halfway through the article on what was happening, or what my proposal was, or what brain cells we would have to build to climb out of the hole of the kind of violence that's taken over there. But before we do that, let's see if anybody has a thought for us. If you're out there in listener land, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. Call that number and you're listening to the show. And if you have a question, you just push 1, and we'll be having a conversation. So before we move forward into the next half of this article, I'm just going to see if anybody's got a thought for us. Jeanie, do you have any thoughts to add, sweetie?
No, I don't. We've got a full switchboard today, so...
Yeah, I know you've been working diligently on your book.
Yeah. No,
any
it's
thoughts
kind
come
of
up
the
around
same
the idea
thing.
of just and fair behavior?
Yeah, just that, we need to, just like you said, watching the Shattered Dreams of Peace brought in some more information and new awareness about what went on, in the previous era and leading up to what we're seeing now. And, we have to know our history or we're going to repeat it and keep repeating it. And, one of the things that I've been digging into is talking about the just and fair behavior, and even an article that you actually kind of directed me into looking it up, and where police work originally began back, in the early centuries or whatever, that they were to keep the slaves in order. And it's crazy. I mean, they've evolved from that, but there's still got to be some of that mindset hanging out.
Yeah, I think that it's inbred in the genes now. That to a great degree, as we look at how policing is carried out. If you look at it, we could totally and completely eradicate the police state and have peace officers throughout the land, and that would be people who would have done their work, who would be conscious beings, who could walk into a community, walk into a conflict, and know how, instead of threatening, bullying, pulling out their guns, and shooting people, could be, and there are many peace officers out there, I acknowledge them. There's some, just some wonderful posts on YouTube that I've actually put on my Facebook page over the years, where a policeman catches somebody in a crime and ends up talking to them and finding out what their a mother. One comes to mind of a mother who just had kids, and the police officer goes to the bank and takes some money out and goes and buys a family food instead of charging her with a crime. You know, this is the work of a peace officer, as opposed to the law enforcement that is a mindset of, sadly, hostility and fear. And it's actually, you know, if you look into police education, a great deal of it is you are the thin blue line between the good people and the bad people, and you're the only one that can save everybody. And it's presented in the form of a war. And then we look at the last few years, how the military has turned over so much of its technology, its vehicles, and its weapons to police in the streets of the towns of America. And to me, that's a travesty. It is, you know, based on a lesson we've talked about many times from the Course in Miracles. In my defenselessness, my power and safety lie. And yet, what's happening in policing is, and as we started out this article yesterday with Job in his statement of it, basically, that which I feared most has come upon me. When I put the amplifier of fear and dread behind a thought complex of a fantasized negative outcome, I get to create that outcome. And we need for people to have the brain cells to recognize how they work as creators and how to clean up the mess, because the mess that's been built over hundreds of years in this country and thousands of years in the world, it's time for cleanup if we're ever going to have a safe, nurturing place for our children and our grandchildren and their children to grow up. And to me, that's more important than anything else. Is there anything from either of those articles you've got handy you'd like to share?
Let me open one up here.
And if any of this conversation stirs anything for you, please put up a hand. Go for it, Jean.
One of them is a lady who is director over the Office of Tribal Justice, and she's presenting to the committee of the United States Senate Committee on Indian Affairs.
Right.
And she talks about American Indians are victims of violent crime at rates more than twice the national average, far exceeding any other ethnic group in the country. Nearly 1 out of every 4 Native Americans between the ages of 18 and 24 is a victim of a violent crime, the highest per capita rate of violence of any racial group considered by age. The account for nearly 10% of violent crimes prosecuted by the Justice Department. Indians fall victim to violent crime at about 2 times the rate of African Americans, 2.5 times that sustained by Caucasians, and 4.5 times that of Asian Americans. And it goes on down and talks about, you know, that, let's see, where is it? Gives the number of how many before the age of 18 are raped, and that their ability to handle the, you know, to like arrest or whatever, that if it's a reservation officer, law enforcement officer, they are not allowed to detain or arrest or anything if it's not another Native American. Well, most of the people that commit the crimes are not Native American, and they're taking it out on, so the hands are tied of the law enforcement on the reservations, and then they attempt to get the state to come in with their law enforcement, and most of the time their answer is that, you know, they're too busy or that they're tied up with other things or whatever. And so there's so many of them for Native Americans that goes, you know, they just turn their head. They go the other way. They're unresolved. Nobody goes after it. They don't try to solve it. And it started a long time ago. It's like that's current. However, if you go back, we're taught that the Native Americans and the colonists had this awesome Thanksgiving dinner, and everybody was wonderful. But there was like, I don't have that article right in front of me, but it was up to like 5 million Native Americans that were taken captive, and because they knew the land here in this country, what they would do, if they escaped, they could stay away, or they could get away easier than the African American slaves. And so what they did was they shipped the Native Americans over to Spain or France or other places where they had no clue where they were or the lay of the land there or whatever, and they were captive. And there was a quote, I was trying to find it. It was actually the when they were being sworn in or whatever, what they would say, the policing, and this was actually in the 1700s, and like I said, a lot of it has changed and evolved, but there's still a lot of this still in the blood system that hasn't been dealt with. But their oath in North Carolina was, and then they would say their name, do swear that I will, as searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons upon the slaves in my district, faithfully and as privately as I can discharge the trust reposed in me as the law directs to the best of my power, so help me God. So they were actually, their task was to go after slaves. And then there was another one where it was like if you were it was from the law enforcement again, that, if you were a slave owner, and they put in Native Americans and blacks and I can't remember the third one. Anyway, that they were considered property. They were not people. And so if someone owned them and the slave, got out of hand and they had to correct them, and the correction ended in the death of the slave, that the property owner would not be held accountable. It would be as if the event never happened. And so those are just some of the things that I just found yesterday, and I haven't really got them in order yet.
Yeah, if looking at that resonates something for you and has you holding your breath as you're listening to what Jeanie's sharing, I would suggest taking some worksheets and head to your nearest theater this weekend and see the Quentin Tarantino movie, Murders of the Flower Moon. True story back in the 20s. And just pure, unadulterated theft and insanity perpetrated on the Native American population, just beyond comprehension. So certainly a place where the injustice will resonate. If you have any issues of justice to forgive, they'll be resonated. And when enough people clean up those sorts of things in their minds and bring the active presence of love and conscious action toward this world of injustice, then the world of injustice is going to begin to heal as each person takes on the injustice within themselves. So if you haven't seen it, it just came out last weekend. We went out opening day, and it was profoundly powerful and definitely resonated a lot. Murders of the Flower Moon. So, Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody on the phone with you with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, there are no hands up. Like I said, this is probably the most people that we've had on the switchboard in a long time. Oh, we had a hand just now go up. Well, he just
awesome. Let's say hello.
Oh, there he is. I believe it's Dusty 904. You're on the air.
Oh, well, aloha, everybody. Good to hear your voice.
Aloha. Welcome. How are you, sir?
Yeah, thanks. I am doing pretty darn well today. I'm grateful to be alive.
Nice.
And I wanted
I'm with you on that.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. I figured you were. You're still yakking away on this program, so it's all good. You were talking about indigenous peoples earlier, and I saw the most outrageous thing one time, and I mean, I've hung out with a lot of indigenous. I've been very fortunate. In the West, I've hung out with some pretty I don't know, sort of the inner sanctum as well as powwows and things like that of some indigenous people. So I had a little background in it.
Right.
So one time I saw about 20 years ago, I saw a program on PBS, and they were saying how when the first quality film cameras and the audio recording devices came out in the early 30s, that they sent a whole team down to the Mississippi Delta to capture the song and dance, because the very last of those that were actually slaves coming over on the ship way back when were in their 80s, and they were about gone, and they wanted to catch it before it was gone. A very noble cause. And I watched this program, and I just went, oh my God, and I howled, and I thought, I wonder if they'll ever figure this out, because what I was sort of expecting from those folks that came over from Africa when they did it was just a drum and a dance in a circle, was a little more of a polyphonic, like a boom, boom, ticka, 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 boom, boom, ticka, boom, boom, something that had a little bit of intricacy to it.
Right.
And it wasn't. It was exactly what I had seen in indigenous peoples' powwows. And what had happened, of course, and I think Jeanie touched on this maybe, but the folks that came over from Africa and the indigenous peoples of this continent were both considered subhuman and about the same, and we're all thrown in the same, big pile down there. And so they mixed cultures a lot. And the African folks evidently took on the indigenous peoples. It was close enough, anyway, their musical thing. And what was interesting about it, well, there was a couple things very interesting about it. First of all, I just knew it wasn't, what they came over on the boat with. It came from this continent mostly. And the first major powwow that I ever went to, I was expecting something pretty wowzer, and there was a lot of people. And there was about 8 guys, and they would take maybe a 20-inch, 24-inch hoop drum, which just means mostly it's just a frame with a skin on it, and it had cords, and they would put sticks in the ground so that you could hang the drum about 2 feet off the ground, 3 feet off the ground, and these guys would beat the drum. They didn't do a boom boom chicka chicka boom boom, or even the Hollywood version of boom ding 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 boom ding ding. What's it make the red man red? That they didn't even do that. It was just boom 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 boom. And as a drummer, I was like, what? Come on, that's kind of boring, ain't it? But all these guys were serious. They were part of the inner circle of whatever it was, so they got to beat on the drum, and it was just that. But after my first realization that it wasn't something that a modern day drummer ordinarily would be immediately attracted to, I just started paying attention. Now all the people in the circle, they got in a huge circle, and they did the exact same thing as they did in this 1930s black and white films that I saw from the Smithsonian. They would kind of put their arms on each other's kind of arms, shoulders, and circle counterclockwise, and just do this little shuffle dance. Just a little shuffle to the left. That was all it was. And time was the beat. But the beat, and here's what was so amazing for me, was the beat was just boom, boom, boom. It was just a pulse. But after a while, it didn't take very long either. I went, oh my God, everything's pulsing with this. The ground, the grass, the people, me, everything was going boom, boom. It was the earth heard it. and people were dancing to that, and it was so powerful, and yet it was just a steady pulse. And I was amazed at how powerful that could be, just that, with the intention, of course, and they had all the right intention. But the Smithsonian thought that they had gotten African American, but no, I don't think they did. And I wonder how long it took them to figure it out, if they ever have.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's how music. And it's what had happened was, of course, the cavalry had taken away the drums. When the Lakota Sioux did their Sundance, they were starting to use their drums again for their spirituality. The evil powers in lighter skins took away the drums because they knew that was also part of how they went to war, but it was their spirituality within it. And so consequently, the indigenous peoples had no problem hooking up with the dark-skinned African people.
African American.
Anyway, it was a beautiful merger of those two, even though it was forced. I like the fact that those two aspects, at least, seem to have gotten along real well, at least musically. And I thought you might find that interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And, when you think about a lot of people in this culture want to be sophisticated, and they don't realize that the word sophisticated, the root of it really means fake or phony. And you point out tied in what Jeannie's conversation was, tied into one of the ways that these indigenous cultures were obliterated was to make sure that everything that worked in their culture, from their language to their music to their ceremonies to their healing, that everything had to be obliterated. And you realize when you think about that, we realize that most of civilization, what we call civilization, is built on the obliteration of the indigenous energetic patterns that work to produce a real life. I love what Mahatma Gandhi said when they said, they asked him what he thought of Western civilization. He said he thought it would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's right.
It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at how much effort today is being put into obliterating people's choice.
No kidding.
It's wake-up time. And that mindset of control, if you watch that film, Murders of the Flower Moon, the mindset that's presented there, to me, as I was watching it, it was like I was just watching the political game unfold in America in the last few years. It's the same mindset that is the mindset of, I'm going to own everything, and it doesn't matter who I kill or who I destroy or who I offend, or it's just, and I'll develop the sophisticated methods, the fakeness to make what I'm doing appear real. And if anybody catches me at it, it was interesting. The one line in the film, the guy who organizes the crime, which is just monstrous, like huge and monstrous against the Osage Indians. When he gets caught and his henchmen start to fall in line, he's got one of them that he's trying to get him to come over, and the line was just so. It was like listening to some of the conversations we're hearing today. Literally, his words were, "I have the best lawyers."
Oh no!
Like he's telling his henchmen, "Don't testify against me. Come, my lawyers will take care of you. I have the best lawyers." And you could just see the whole mindset laid out in that film that it's expressing so deeply today in the world. It's just bizarre. And as Jeannie said, and I don't remember who it was that originally put that quote out there, but if we refuse to become aware of history, we're going to play it out again and again. There's actually a book about that. I think it's called "Why Is This Happening to Me Again?" Something like that. So
yeah, I think about that.
Definitely wake up.
With me. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting about that history. I've really had that hammered into me the last, I don't know, for a while, because here in St. Augustine Beach, there's some kids and they're tourists, and I see everybody walks around with pretty much their smartphone duct taped to their head, sort of thing, and then
right.
And what's sad, and I don't mind, I don't care about a lot of stuff, but when history, just what you said, they don't know history. They don't know. The millennials don't know probably 10% of the history, and which is unfortunate, because again, that old thing, you got to learn from history, you repeat it, and nobody cares, because everybody is caught up in the. I mean, it's scary to watch the digital, the drug thing working its way through.
Well, and also, in education, look at, we're back to burning books. We've got a faction in this country that's burning books and literally obliterating truth in education and codifying it as law, that you're not allowed to teach the truth. You're not allowed to teach what actually happened. We have a story, and it's a cover story, and it's one that, the old adage that says in war, it's the winners who write the history. And that particular mindset, if you extrapolate it out, when you watch the Murders of the Flower Moon, you watch the protagonist in it and the horrendous scam that takes place, and you can just extrapolate it out. That's exactly what's going on today. It is a mindset. And, if you go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, and, they ask him the question, what's most important in the law? And what he talks about, he doesn't say, as the Greeks tell us, that he says, love God, love neighbor as yourself. That's history changed. He talks about a mindset. He talks about how to achieve a mindset where truth and human life is available. And if we don't have that, then all we've got is that unending cycle of insanity.
Yes, and I know everybody gets high on the thought of, civilization and Prometheus, however you want to say it, is the big deal, but that seems to be where the problem started. I mean, from that point on, they talk about World War II being total war, like it was the first one. That's been going on.
Not by a long shot.
Civilization. Yeah, and it's going to keep going on, because that's the pattern that, power corrupts, absolute power kills everybody, that one, and sort of thing. And but that is a repeating pattern, and I wish that everybody understood that, and they went, let's just see what we can do about not doing that. And in my fantasy, boy, this is, of course, pure whoopee-doo fantasy, but I used to kid around about being a emperor of North America, and how I would change things. Of course, now you'd have to be emperor of the whole world to make anything work. But if I could just have my druthers, I would take our military and start converting as much of it as fast as possible into eco warriors for the environment.
Working with the world, the physical planet, Yeah.
So instead of when Bush is with his ploy to have the second Iraq thing going on, and Katrina's over here and people dying, the soldiers should have been here doing whatever they would have learned in echo training or at anything, what I mean, over here, helping those folks in New Orleans. And,
right.
And that, because there's such an organized force, it would be beautiful. I mean, it's certainly not going to happen anytime soon, but it's one of my little fantasies. Okay, well, I appreciate that.
You know, if enough minds can conceive it, and we can take it to critical mass, it will happen.
Yes.
So I'd hold the space with you that shift can take place, that sanity can rule.
Well, yeah, and you know, I know this much. Sanity can rule in you. It can rule in you or anybody. It can rule in me, but I don't know that I can necessarily convince the rest of the world, but I don't have to. If I'm living it fully enough, and you're living it fully enough, and, you know, I mean, it can only do a little bit of that 100th monkey thing, you know. So,
Yeshua, the physicist said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, and he wasn't talking about bread.
Right.
He was talking about my take is he was talking about the possibility that we could actually discover ourselves as the active presence of love and begin to live as that. And when enough people do that, when enough people have the tools, the technology, and are inspired to do the work, then there's going to be an energetic shift throughout the whole of humanity. So that's the hope I hold out for it.
Right. Right. And I wanted to share something. I guess we got a little bit of time. Something that beautiful in a very, you know, well, kind of off the wall way, but it is beautiful. I have a half sister I didn't even know about until about 25 years ago, and
right.
She's 83 or 4, and she had everything in the world wrong with her. I mean, she was in living hell, and I mean, she was the kind of person that needed a morphine injection every day just to breathe, you know, that kind of thing. And she was trying to live and trying to be, you know, a big girl and all that. And I would call her every day, and she says, well, you're my prayer partner. So I would, okay, you bet. And every day I'd go there, and she was, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but I'm just stating something that has a beautiful outcome, I think. She was a very, very rigid, hardcore, what can you call it, fundamentalist Christian. In other words, the current version of the, whatever it is, Bible, is law, period. That's it. End of story. That's the only wisdom that's ever been written in the creation of the universe. It's right there. And for her, it was one and done. You believe in Jesus, or you go to hell. You believe in Jesus, you go to heaven. One and done. And I went, wow, with that kind of, and my experience has been so different than that. And but so she was in the process of dying, okay? And anyway, so I was wondering how that was going to be for her, because she had a heart. I mean, it was one of these dichotomies. She had this big heart. Oh God, she had a big heart. And she just, every time I talked with her, I just saw kind of a white kind of glow, like a cloud that was. And when she did finally go, for about 2-3 days, I and her niece, who helped her through the last 2 weeks, who flew up there, flew 2,000 miles to be with her and help her, we both had a sense that she was just kind of floating in a sea of love. That was it. And I went, wow. So no matter all this stuff, you know, that people like me, I like try to get all the circuitry of how everything works and all that, and for my money at least, her circuitry wasn't quite on point, but nonetheless, she had love, and she floated in love when she died. And I started thinking back through history, and even the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, which was considered divine, it all boiled down to some point there was one of the gods in the mythology that had a scale, and the Pharaoh would put his heart on one side, and if his heart wasn't bigger than the weight on the other side, he wasn't going where he was supposed to go. So no matter where you go in history, it kind of, if you go to the inner part of it, it's love, just what you've been talking about.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, it's nice to be touched by that, isn't it?
Oh, man. And just, yeah. And when it does, because I don't know about you, but I can find myself, especially living without a partner, a mind wandering on some stupid, inane thing that means nothing. And I'll snap out of it and come back.
Next worksheet.
Yeah. Well, that's
awesome.
I'm the worksheet project. We're in process, rather. It is sweet. It is sweet, and
yeah.
But that was such a lesson to see her, to feel her, and to have it verified by the next Gen Xer, who was pretty sensitive herself and felt the same thing that I did about the love.
Sweet. Awesome. All right, sir. Well, any other thoughts for you today?
Well, I got tons of thoughts, but I think I'll just shag out of here for now, and thank you all for the program on Friday. I try to catch it when I can.
All right, have a blessed one. Blessings. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.
We have another hand
Miss
up.
Jeanie? All right, let's go for it.
And it is Mr. Joe, 864. You're on the air. Are you out in the field?
Oh, Joe, she got you before I got the chance. That's amazing. Good work, Jeanie.
Joe, you're muted apparently. We can't hear you.
Got to push your mute button, sir. Oh, maybe he stepped away from the phone. Maybe he's outstanding in his field. Give me a second to see if he shows up. Hello, Joseph. Oh, he must have had to step away from the phone. All right, well, do you have anybody else? Miss Jeanie with a hand up.
No, the only one.
Well, then I'm just going to review a few thoughts from the earlier part of the week where we've been talking about what it takes to heal. And one of the key thoughts that we covered in talking about this is that if not all of our wounds, many, and therefore our pain, etc., are rooted in genetically inherited traumas, the mind will organize those energetic patterns from within physiology into pictures that make us look like there are things in the world that are the cause of what those inherited traumas are. But if we're in trauma, it's because there's trauma inside of us. Multi-generational assaults reinforced through unconscious actions generation after generations, when they're stored and repeated, it becomes the environment in which we swim, the mental environment. And remember those opening words in the book of John that don't say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh, but rather, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. And to remember that, well, the mind makes it look like each pain perception is different and separated. And when you think about how the mind does that, there's this database of pain, and you think about how the mind makes it, puts it into 1,000 different pictures, And so being in 1,000 different pictures, it looks like 1,000 different things, when the truth is it comes from one root, one base. And at the same time, you know, if we bring Einstein's thought in, to me this kind of keys in. If you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. So the very idea that I'm over here and you're over there and there's no connection between us, I mean, that's what allows for war. Einstein says that separation, that is an optical delusion. In other words, if we could raise the rate of vibration at which our mind receives information, we would see that we are energetically connected to everyone. We can't extract from life. But our minds have been trained. And in the same way that we separate out, oh, this pain is related to that pain's that one's that. You know, they're all different causes. The truth is they're all one and they're within us. And that same act of separating those things is what, I'm not sure whether it's the cause of or just a reflection of the fact that we bought into this idea that we're separated from each other. You know, if I could raise the rate of vibration in which my eye receives information, I would see the information. My brain would be able to respond to the information that shows that we're all tied together, that we're not a multitude of beings. We are cells in a being. You know, if you look at the ancient teachings, they talked about what they called the mystical body of Christ. That didn't have to do with Yeshua. They were talking about the embodiment of this human presence of love is singular, though it expresses through many cells in that one body. And each of us is a cell. And the thing that the world does its best to convince us of is that we're not a cell in that body. In fact, we're the opposite. We're the offense of that body. And instead of bringing into expression our true nature through this instrument called a body-mind unit, we get lost in these generational errors, these generational patterns. And it's those dissociated traumas in the 1,000 different forms that can show it to us that, when activated, obscures the subtle, permanently available experience of ourselves as the truth of who we are, as love. So the optical delusion. I'm not sure which is cause and which is effect. But the fact that we can pretend all of our pain is separate, although all of the different places we project our pain, it allows us to separate it, and we end up in this optical delusion that we are separate. And it's hard for the mind to conceive of anything other than separation. We've been so deeply ensconced in it. This block to the awareness that we are truly created essence of love is never imposed from the outside. They're internal. They're removable if one has the technology to do so, and that's what we're here to work with. All healing is literally the return to love, and it's a strictly inside job. And the act of removing intergenerational trauma is the true definition of forgiveness. And that takes us down to just the last minute or so, and so I'm going to just say thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope all is well in your world. Create the best year ahead of your eternal life. Have an awesome